Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, November 7th, 2014.
I'm Ryan Garner.
I'm Ty Anderson.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eklund is laid up today. He's having some problems with his back, so we will forge ahead with the four of us on a Friday, discussing a number of the games that occurred in the NHL last night, and what is going to happen over the weekend, and a few stories that occurred yesterday. Kevin, let's jump right into it. Interesting game in Boston yesterday, 5-2 win for the Bruins. Edmonton was lead 2-1, and the Bruins rallied with 4 goals in the third period to win. The Edmonton Oilers have now lost 4 games in a row, and there's renewed panic with the Oilers that things are not working. Taylor Hall is out for probably a month. What is your read on the Edmonton situation?
Well, I mean, it's drastic. If you look at the Western Conference, I think you could say something good about every team in that conference, with the exception of maybe the Arizona Coyotes and the Edmonton Oilers. And I can understand the panic. This was a season when they were supposed to be on the uptick. We were supposed to see signs of improvement, and all we've seen is a higher level of inconsistency, if that's possible. Because they had the poor start, then they had a little run where suddenly they looked like they were going to be a legitimate NHL franchise, and now we're back looking as sloppy as you can look at the NHL level. So I wouldn't be shocked. And when they originally got out of the gate slowly, I didn't think they would make a quick move. But now, I'm like everyone else. I'm expecting the shoe to drop at some point.
Ty, you were at the game last night. What were your thoughts?
I mean, on Edmonton, I think they have such potential up front. I think Nugent Hopkins had a great game. Benoit Pouliot and David Perron both played really well in the wing. Even Nail Yakupov had a great game, I think, in terms of creating chances in the offensive zone. It was just a defensive zone that this team is a wreck. And Nikita did not have a good game. I don't think Keith Ollie really made an impact in the season debut, and even guys like Jeff Petrie didn't really notice him throughout the night. Mark Fane, similar. So while the Edmonton Oilers were able to bring it to the Boston Bruins for a lot of the game, that inexperience and that lack of talent, I think, on that back end really came to hurt them in the end.
Ryan, you've long been a critic of this organization. I know that Dallas Eakins is one of your favorite coaches. There was an uptick of enthusiasm when this team, rebounded from that. I think it was 0-4-1 start. I think they won 4 games in a row. Now it's back. The roller coaster's down at the bottom now. They've lost 4 in a row. I mean, do you think the next move is a trade? Do you think the next move is Dallas Eakins out on a rail?
Unfortunately, I think Dallas Eakins is going to be the first one to go. I don't think, however, that's going to solve any problems in Edmonton. See, the problem with Edmonton this is the 5th year of Taylor Hall on the roster, right? And that was supposed to be the point where the Oilers said, okay, this is the rebuild. We're now 5 years into it, and there haven't been any signs of improvement. And you can look at the roster on paper compared to the roster last season, where the Oilers swapped out players like Sam Gagner and Ales Hemsky, who are struggling in new environments, which would suggest those guys are not good NHL hockey players, which would help maybe say to Edmonton, okay, well, we can pinpoint why the team was struggling in the past. And then you bring in guys like Benoit Pouliot, you bring in Teddy Purcell, and those guys have been to, kind of a similar degree, the similar type of players, similar production, similar effort, and it just hasn't been good enough. And on the back end, while you had players like Anton Belov and Philip Larson, who are now in the KHL, the Oilers this season, they were kind of selling it as, okay, we've brought in Mark Fane and we've brought in Nikita Nikitin, and while those players are upgrades over guys who are no longer playing in the NHL, they're not good enough to compete with legitimate first pairing NHL defense. And so there's still a gap between where the Oilers think they are and where they want to be, which is a playoff team.
Ty, the Bruins shouldn't get a lot of credit for going around Keith Ollie and beating Ben Scrivens. They did that a lot of times when they were both Leafs. We were talking before we went live here about what the options are for Edmonton if we do go down the road that Dallas Eakins is let go. And Kevin, I mean, the name of Dan Bylsma has popped up, and we've heard the Messier rumors earlier. I'm not sure either one is really a viable option. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't. Neither one strikes me as a perfect fit. Dan Bylsma is the name out there, and he's going to get a job, and he's a quality coach. But this is a team in need of defensive help, and that's not what we think of when we think of Dan Bylsma. We think of an offensive team, and to bring him in and expect him to transform that team into a better defensive team, I don't know. I mean, that's not the way I go. Plus, he's an American now. In a global league, that shouldn't matter. But it almost feels like if you're going to be the Edmonton Oilers, you want an Alberta guy or a guy with a Western Canadian background, somebody that's come up through the Western Hockey League. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but Bylsma just doesn't seem to be the fit in that regard as well. I mean, Messier doesn't have the coaching experience, but he certainly has the Oilers pedigree. He understands, the obligations there to make this team better for the fan base. That's not the way I would go either. But when you're switching coaches in mid-season, your options are limited. It's always better in the summer when it's clear who the top candidates are. The top AHL candidates have emerged. And that's how they ended up with Dallas Eakins. Now, I supported Eakins at the start of the year. I thought, this guy was a very good coach. I mean, I can remember specifically talking to GMs, talking about, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. This is a good hire by Edmonton. He suddenly didn't forget how to coach. So either the pressures there are so great, or the personnel, not beyond the changes they made last season, just aren't good enough. So I expect something to happen. If I had to guess, I would guess it's not either going to be Messier or Bylsma.
Yeah, the experiment of John Tortorella, an American coach in Vancouver, worked so well, so I'm sure Edmonton's going to emulate that. Let's talk about another game last night. I thought was probably the most entertaining game of the night. And we were talking about that before we went live again, Kevin. Was the Winnipeg-Pittsburgh game. Winnipeg has been playing very well lately under Paul Maurice, and they played very well at the end of the year when Maurice replaced Claude Noel as coach. And they seem to be, going pretty well and getting good goaltending out of Pavlik. And that game. I mean, both teams had the throttle wide open. It ended up in overtime and into a shootout. And Crosby and Malkin come through in the shootout for a 4-3 victory. Was that one of the better games you've seen so far this year?
It might have been the most entertaining game I've seen all season. It was an enthralling game, and two thoughts on that game. First of all, the Winnipeg Jets, who felt like they were being handicapped when they had to start out in the Eastern Conference, probably wish they were back in the Eastern Conference now, because the playoffs are going to be a sweat for them. I know where they're sitting today in the standings, but it's not going to be easy making the playoffs in the West. And boy, they'd be in the thick of it in the East. They really would. They're playing good hockey right now. All the things that they need to have happened are happening. They're playing much better defensively, and as we've now spoken about for a couple of podcasts, their goaltending. And you got to give Cheveldayoff some credit on this. Like, I think everybody in the world, maybe the universe, thought they needed to make a goaltending switch. Mm-hmm. And Cheveldayoff stuck with Pavlik, and he's played well. And he's really given them an opportunity. And they look like a real strong team, and I think Paul Maurice deserves some credit as well. I think he got them on headed in the right direction defensively last season, and now it's a continuation of that. And there's a lot of B-list cast members on this team, and they don't have the superstar, the flag carrier, but they got enough of those B-plus players that they can be a pretty good offensive team when they get it rolling. But what I really want to talk about is the Penguins. The problem with the Penguins, and we all knew it, was they couldn't play defense. They couldn't convert to playoff-style hockey. Mm-hmm. So what do? They bring in a guy who's playing puck possession hockey, which, on the face, it seems like, okay, that's just more offense, and it is. But what a difference it's made. Their ability now to get the puck up to the forwards is significantly improved. And the other thing I've noticed is the back checkers now have to move away from. There's no multiple player coverage of Crosby anymore because they got to watch the defenseman coming from the back, and Crosby has more room. It's just that simple out there, and it really makes a difference. So this Penguins team under Mike Johnston is really fun to watch, and I think they're a significant Stanley Cup contender. I don't think there's anything else you can say about them.
Ty, we were talking about the Fleury contract yesterday, and I thought Fleury played well in this game. Marc-Andre Fleury signed to a 4-year extension at $5.75 million a season. There's enough critics out there regarding Fleury, but what were your thoughts on that deal, and do you think that was a good deal for the Penguins?
It's tough because I don't think that there's a great market out there next year for goaltending, and Fleury does win. He does win in the regular season. Whether that's a product of the great team in front of him or the new system that they're implementing, we don't necessarily know. But it's all about the playoffs with him. So we can sit here and talk about the contract and whether or not it's too much, too high, too many years, whatever it may be. But it all comes down to how he performs in the springtime, and that's going to be what this contract is judged by. If they can win another cup with him in net, then you'd say, yeah, it's probably worth it because this league is so competitive and it's so hard to win the Stanley Cup, let alone two with the same goaltender. So I think that's how we'll judge that contract. The only gripe I think you could really have with it is they signed him at the height, I think, of his performance this year. He was playing lights out for about 2 weeks, and he's been pretty good all season. But it's just the timing of it seems rather odd to me to do it right here, right now. But beyond that, I think that they look around there. It's tough. You don't know what you're going to have next season. Maybe you want to wait until you give Thomas Greiss a few more games, a few more months of him to see what he has, but potential-wise. But again, I don't think they were going to get better than Fleury, and the team loves Marc-Andre Fleury, and that can play a huge role in the locker room for sure.
Yeah, Ryan, another interesting game last night, and a team that. I'm a little surprised at the way they're playing is the Vancouver Canucks. They beat the San Jose Sharks 3-2 for their 10th win of the season. Ryan Miller is 10-1 on the year. What are your thoughts on this team? Because I'm dumbfounded. I thought they were on the road, on the hill, on the downslope of the hill, and right now they're playing very well.
I have been really, really impressed with the way the Canucks have played because I was with you. I didn't see them being a playoff team. I didn't even see them really contending based on how the Sedins looked last season. But Bada has re-energized those guys. They enjoy playing with him. He fits right into their cycle game. He is a threat, much more of a threat than I think Burrows ever was. And Miller, we know about Miller. We know that he's one of the most competitive goalies in the league. And he felt that he got kind of the short end of the stick in St. Louis. He got some of the unfair blame for what happened there in the playoffs. And he went into Vancouver, handed the #1 spot, shown some faith by that organization, who obviously needed starting goaltender to replace Luongo. And he has run with the job. He's done a fantastic job. And that defense, even though they're aging, even though they're getting a little long in the tooth back there, they are very solid at just hammering down, clinching their own end. I think we saw it last night against San Jose in that third period, where the Sharks have enough talent to really lay it on thick down the stretch. But the Canucks defense held up, Miller held up. And one guy that really impresses me on that roster, everyone talks about the loss of Ryan Kessler, but I think Nick Bonino's performance has really negated the loss of Kessler. Bonino, he's a fantastic young player. He's a guy that he was able to find open space and compete hard for the puck, get in on the forecheck. I really like him. He's fun to watch, and I think he's been a big difference maker for the Canucks, giving them some secondary scoring.
Yeah, and Kevin, the Willie Desjardins had a desirable. He follows Tortorella, and I heard a commentator say a couple days ago that a coach couldn't ask for a better coach to follow than following John Tortorella, because even if he's an authoritarian despot, he'll probably be more looked upon more friendly than John Tortorella and what he did last year. So I think, do you agree that Desjardins is benefiting from being the coach after Tortorella?
Well, certainly he's benefiting, but I also think he was the perfect coach because, he's known as a positive energy guy. And I think, talking about Rabada energizing the Sedins, but I think Willie Desjardins has also energized them too with just the way he treats the players. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Tortorella gets results in some spots, but he's difficult. He's not fun to play for. It's not an environment that players enjoy. And I agree completely with Ryan's assessment of Bonino. In fact, I'll go take it a step further and say he's outperformed Ryan Kessler this season. Offensively, certainly that is the case statistically, but also I just think he's been so important for the Vancouver Canucks, and I know what Kessler's going to mean for Anaheim in the postseason, but for now, I think Bonino has given that team the lift. And to me, what I marvel at with the Canucks is not only how well they're playing, but the consistency of their performance. They're as good at home as they are good on the road as they are at home. They're getting production up and down. They've had a name defense for a long time. Players like Edler and Hamhuis and Bayexa. These are players that everybody knows. They've got a good track record, and they're still performing at a pretty high level. So I know we're going to deal with your question about who's the most surprising team, but to me it's Vancouver. The others have also been surprising, but I never anticipated the level of performance that we're seeing out of the Canucks. And one final point about Miller, I knew that he was a good fit because Vancouver is a difficult place to play. We talk about Toronto, we talk about Montreal, but when you're a goalie, because of the Luongo situation there, I think it's tough to go in there and be the goalie in Vancouver. Ask Eddie Lack, ask Corey Schneider. It's tough, but Miller is the perfect goalie to handle that too. He's very cerebral, very smart. He knows how it all works. He's just unflappable in that regard. So I think not everybody could have come in there and performed and dealt with the situation quite the way Miller has.
Yeah, and even though Buffalo is a smaller market, it's a very intense hockey market, so I think he's used to that pressure. Buffalo, I think, is as close to a Canadian hockey market as you can get from a non-Canadian city. So let's move on to a couple of the items that came up late in the day yesterday. One that struck home with the Maple Leafs was the suspension of winger Carter Ashton for 20 games for violating the league's policy on performance-enhancing substances. Apparently, a substance known as clenbuterol was discovered in his system. He's been suspended 20 games without pay. He loses about $170,000 of his $850,000 salary. Ashton released a statement through the NHL Players Association that the substance was from an asthma inhaler that he borrowed from a friend during a workout in August, and that he used it once, and that just have to mute Kevin here.
Well, we're still talking, so that means that your client is still not had any resolution
behind the scenes here.
Trying to mute him, but
catch-22, the league wants him to talk, but he can't really talk. With the criminal thing hanging over, can he?
Hey. It's on our blooper reel at the end of the year.
Yeah, definitely. This is the problem with having here we go. I discovered it finally. There you go.
There it is. Nice job,
hey,
Mike.
I learned. I'm quick on my feet. Anyway, so Ashton gets suspended for 10 games, and it's going to cost him $170,000. But Ryan, you first. The one thing that I think is different, and there's been a stigma in Major League Baseball and in some aspects in the NFL with players that have been suspended for performance-enhancing drugs, A-Rod, Ryan Braun being the examples. The thing is that those players are star players, and even after that, even with that stigma, even after the suspension, they have come back because they are star players and they can perform. Carter Ashton was to be kind, a borderline NHLer. He made the Leafs only because he would have had to clear through waivers. He was kept on the roster, didn't play the first 9 games, and played the last 3 games before his suspension. Do you think this is something that could cost him his future in the league?
Ooh, I don't think it'll cost him his future in the league. I think for a guy like that who's a borderline NHLer, you look at it and you say, does it look bad? Of course. And is he denying it? Of course he is, right? Because, I mean, who among us hasn't used someone else's puffer, right? Like, come on. That was a new excuse for me. I'd never heard that one before, but got to give him some points for creativity. I don't see it carrying a huge stigma simply because, like, he does have that excuse, right? Just like all players do, and it's something that you can either believe him or not. If you choose not to believe him, okay, go ahead, that's your preference. But I think we've come to a point, especially with the performance-enhancing drugs argument, where some athletes have used it to become the best of all time in their sport. Barry Bonds, Lance Armstrong, right? And some guys have used it to become NHL players. And if you put yourself in Carter Ashton's shoes, not saying he did it, right? Not saying that he did any wrongdoing. His story could be valid. But you're looking at a guy who says, I'm a borderline NHLer. That's as far as my talent is going to get me. And look, you just said, look at the kind of money he's making to be on the Leafs roster, right? Look at the difference in pay between an NHL contract and an AHL contract for guys on two-way deals. It's, I don't want to say that, come down as the morality police or anything, but it's a huge difference. And there are definitely some guys who are going to make the wrong decision from a moral standpoint when they look at the dollars that are available.
Well, Ty, my argument is that if he is a borderline NHLer with a stigma attached to his name, there are a ton of borderline NHLers out there, and wouldn't a team choose another one that doesn't have the stigma attached compared to the one who does? I mean, that's where, I mean, not saying that, Ashton is liked in the organization. He's a kid with a good work ethic. He has good size. He has good speed. He has never been able to translate his offensive ability from the AHL to the NHL. But so I think he has friends in the organization that might give him that second chance. But if this happens down the line with somebody else like Ashton, that may not be the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I look at this from both sides of it. You do see that he's not a regular in the NHL. He does have a tough time cracking the lineup. So you question, is he doing this on purpose, or is this just a mistake? Because if it's a mistake, he does check. But it's interesting. I think this is a guy that you do give another chance to. The Leafs have given him more than enough chances, I think. But I don't think this is something that you exile him, out of the organization for. And I don't think they will. I think that this is a guy that he can be relied upon as a plug-in. They've done it before, and they'll probably do it again. I just think that this is a steep price that he did pay, and whether it's an accident or not, now he knows, because I think one more violation, and that's when teams will say, no, we're good. Because guys screw up, and that's simple as that, I think. And there's really no way to put it. NHL players are not the smartest in the world, and that's something that it's they don't want to hear that, but some of them, they are a bit reckless with their behavior and what they do put in their bodies. So it's disappointing for Ashton, a guy who is a good story and a guy you do want to root for, just based on the fact that he does work as hard as he does. But mistakes do happen, but this has to be probably the only he's going to get by the Leafs.
Okay, the other story that popped up yesterday that raised a furor on Twitter, and never let it be said that Alan Walsh, the agent, doesn't like starting furors on Twitter. He quoted an NHL Chief Operating Officer John Collins from a speech that he was making, stating that advertising on NHL jerseys is coming and happening to the league very soon. Now, we have an example of what advertising on jerseys looks like if you watch English Premier League soccer, or if you've seen KHL or European League hockey games. Kevin, you have to unmute yourself. But I think there is definitely a feeling against the possibility, the appearance of advertising on that extent on NHL jerseys. I know that I'm a traditionalist, and I really don't want to see that kind of advertising on NHL jerseys. Kevin, you first. Alan Walsh brings this out. that John Collins is saying there's going to be advertising on jerseys. I'm pretty much against it. I think it's probably going to happen one way or the other. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm a traditionalist as well, and I just can't even imagine the great Habs jersey or the Maple Leaf, having advertising. On the other hand, I'm also a realist, and this has been coming for a long time, and I'm a fan of European hockey, and I know that after a while you won't even think about it. It just takes some time to get used to. None of us like change, and I also know. And the Players Association would be supportive of this as well, is you got to continue to grow the revenue. And it's just ancillary revenue, and they're going to be looking for that to try to accomplish that. So I think it's inevitable, and I hope it doesn't get too gaudy. It's one thing to have a patch here or there, but it's something else if you look like you're a little league team with Bucks unfinished furniture on the back or something of that nature. If it's just a subtle attempt, then I can sort of understand them doing that, but I hope it doesn't get too gaudy.
Yeah, Ryan, Chico's bail bonds is looking for.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Now, I would not have a problem if they put advertising on the backs of the jerseys and leave the front pristine, but I have a feeling that since the jersey is seen probably as much as the back, that they're going to want to put it on both. I mean, what do you think? I mean, we all remember, or at least three of us, because Ty is too young, the league without advertising on the boards. And now it's sort of, now you don't even think about it. You just see them all. It would actually look weird if the advertising wasn't on the boards. But I just can't get past the mental picture of having advertising on both front and back jersey. Do you think that they'll limit it, or do you think it's going to be no holds barred?
I think it's going to be very subtle, and this might surprise some people out there, but we've had advertising on jerseys for a while now in the form of a Reebok patch or a Nike swoosh, and these things have happened, and I don't see anyone up in arms over that, even though those have become much more prominent than they were even just a few years ago. So I can see something similar to that where you might just have a logo. I can't see you have a white strip down the left side of the jersey, right, with something crazy like FedEx logo down the side or anything. But I think there's a way that they can do this where it's going to be tasteful, it's going to be classy, and it's not going to look like you're just selling out the values of the league or trying to ruin a team's branding. Now I think you'd get into a situation where you might have some controversy over, say, some teams align with different corporations or companies that might have, a slant or a political slant that fans might disagree with. That's a whole other kettle of fish. But I think the NHL has a way to do this where they can, look, whether you're the commissioner or whether you're one of the 30 NHL owners, your objective is to increase the revenue stream by any means possible. And I think they'll be able to do it in a way that doesn't detract from the game too much.
If Tim Thomas was worth the Bruins, I mean, I'm sure Chick-fil-A would be lining up for an advertisement. Ty, could you see, the spoked wheel of the Boston Bruins being sponsored by Schwinn bicycles or something of that nature?
I mean, it's tough because I think what a lot of people are missing is that a lot of teams already have advertising on their practice jerseys. The Red Wings and the Bruins are two that come to mind immediately. So, and in both cases, the logos themselves haven't been too heinous. So that's kind of the big thing. I think if you look at these teams and you're able to put just a little patch, it's just something on the front, maybe on the back, up on the shoulder for some teams. I don't think it will be a huge deal. I don't think the NHL will ever hit the point where it looks like the Swiss leagues and the European leagues where it's just one big advertisement, looks like a NASCAR car. I don't think we'll ever hit that point, which is what you want. But it's going to be tough. I think it'll be tough when you see a team like Montreal sporting a Bell patch on their jersey, or the Maple Leafs, whatever it may be in Toronto, Tim Hortons. Rogers. And so that might be tough for some people to swallow, I think, especially the traditionalists, like all of us, I think, for the most part. But I don't think it'll be the world. If this league can generate more revenue, they'll do it. They don't really care. I don't think about what we think about it, and if it just sells more jerseys makes them more money, I think they'll be happy.
Okay, I picked out a list of 3 teams that all won last night, who I would consider the 3 of the biggest surprises. But for the purpose of just discussing it, I want to get your input on which team you think is the biggest surprise so far this year. We talked about the Canucks; they're 10-4. Ryan Miller's 10-1 so far this year. They beat the San Jose Sharks 3-2 last night. The Nashville Predators win their 8th game of the season. They're, I believe, 1 point behind the St. Louis Blues in the Central with an 8-3-2 record. They beat the Dallas Stars last night. And the Ottawa Senators with a 3-0 shutout over the Minnesota Wild. Craig Anderson is, usually is an on-again, off-again goaltender, and apparently he is on again this year. They're 7-3-2. Kevin, you first. Which of those 3 teams do you think is the biggest surprise so far this season?
Well, I think it's a tough call, but I'm going with Vancouver because I think Ottawa has been very, very impressive as well. And I think before the season we talked about, we didn't know what Ottawa team we were going to get. Were we going to get the Ottawa team that 2 years ago really could keep the other team off the scoreboard, or were we going to get last season's team which couldn't stop anyone? And I think we're back to where we were 2 seasons ago. And I think the Senators have shown great survival skills. Their goaltending has been good, and I think because of that they've been able to make some hay. But just going back to Vancouver and reiterating, to me, what's so surprising is they're doing it in the West. They've been consistent home and away. They're getting production up and down their lineup, and there's a great they play with great confidence in Vancouver. So I'm gonna go with them.
Ryan, the Predators, the Sens, or the Canucks?
I'm going with the Predators because it's a team that's very easy for a lot of people to dismiss. I know I've talked to several fans from the Western Conference who still aren't exactly sure if the Predators are in the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference, but they're kind of a team that's ignored, right? They're kind of out there on an island by themselves, and so people take them for granted. But the performance by Pekka Rinne, jumping right back into it, kind of regaining his status as one of the best goaltenders in the league, in my mind, buoyed up by that defense, which is a work in progress. It's got some young pieces, but they're developing nicely. Obviously, Shea Weber, the cornerstone there, and I really like some of the additions that they brought in specifically, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but James Neal has. It seems like he's had a resurgence there. He is just an electric player. I think in the time that I've seen him so far this season, I see him as being much more dangerous than he ever was in Pittsburgh, simply because he's kind of taking on a leadership role. Mike Ribeiro's the same way. He's been phenomenal this season, and he's another guy that kind of gets some flack around the league. You're never quite sure what you're going to get. And Philip Forsberg, my current Calder Trophy frontrunner, he's been outstanding. And these guys have been able to kind of steady the ship and increase that team's fortunes. I know a lot of people were unsure what they were going to get with Nashville with Barry Trotz leaving town, but that team is hungry and they're playing an aggressive style and still responsible in the back end. So Nashville is my biggest surprise.
I mean, Rinne is the key, but I think getting the secondary offense that they're getting from guys like Ribeiro and Derek Roy and Forsberg, who is stepping up a lot bigger than a lot of people thought that he was going to, are definitely keys. Ty, the Senators in the Atlantic Division, along with the Bruins and the Leafs, and we get a chance to see this team an awful lot. They really struggled last year. They've impressed me so far. They're not my choice of the 3, but the Sens, the Preds, and the Canucks. Who do you think?
I'll be this guy, and I'll say the Senators. I think when you look at what they did, they didn't really do much in the offseason. David Legwand was kind of their big addition, it seemed, and I think a lot of people were like, well, can Craig Anderson rebound? Can Robin Lehner step up? If he can't? And I think both goalies have played pretty well this year. Lehner has grabbed points in almost all of his starts. I think Anderson's regained his form that he had 2 years prior. So this is a big thing. I think their top line is coming to life now with Clark MacArthur, Kyle Turris, and Bobby Ryan. And I think they can only get better too, which is a great thought, I think, for Sens fans. Erik Karlsson's still an elite puck mover, and there's no one even close to him, I think, in terms of moving the puck out of the offensive zone, or into the offensive zone, rather. So they're my surprise, and why they're my surprise really is that they've hung with some great teams. They pushed Chicago to a shootout just a little while back. They're beating Tampa Bay. They're really bringing it to a lot of these teams. You look at they've beaten Colorado, which Colorado's taking a step back this year. We all kind of are understanding that, but that's another great team that they hung with. So I like what I'm seeing from Ottawa right now, and I think they're only going to get better with time. They're one of those teams that I think when the players do buy into what Paul McLean is selling them, they are a tremendous team. And that's kind of what surprises me, I think, the most is because you look at Nashville. Nashville is getting Rene back, and their defense is great. Their biggest question mark was sort of down the middle up front, which is a big one, don't get me wrong. But when you have a great goaltending, anything's possible. And I think Vancouver, sort of the same thing. You knew that the players were going to go back to having fun playing hockey, which was something they did not have last year under Tortorella. So it's great what a difference in the mindset can do for a team. So I go Ottawa in that regard because you really weren't expecting much, but in a division that's as wide open as the Atlantic, they're really, storming through it.
The Sens to me are the biggest surprise of the three. I mean, I like I said, I didn't expect the Canucks to be in the running for a playoff spot. I thought it was possible that Nashville would succeed if Rene stayed healthy. But the Sens, I had them, almost alongside Buffalo for the McEichel Cup, and they've really stepped up. I mean, Bobby Ryan and Turris, they're getting offense out of Clark MacArthur. Carlson is Carlson, and they're playing a lot better defensively. So if they keep this up, I think in a rather weak Eastern Conference, they're going to make the playoffs. I'm not so sure about Nashville and Vancouver. If they cool down, there are a number of teams that are probably going to be on their heels. But one team that might not be, if this is a long-term injury, is the Minnesota Wild, Kevin. Zach Parise left a game earlier in the week and it was unknown what the situation was, and it came out yesterday that he is out indefinitely with a concussion. Now, that's not really specific. It could be a week, it could be a month, but he's their leading scorer, and I think as Zach Parise goes, so does the Wild. How bad of a situation do you think this is?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think that was well put. I mean, this is like the Penguins losing Crosby because he's that important. When you look at the transformation that the Minnesota Wild have undergone in terms of their ability to score goals, he's at the heart of that. And he's been a very consistent offensive player, and that's the difference between elite level players and just guys that are hot from year to year. He scores every year, and and they've fallen off. The Wild have in terms of their ability to put the puck in the net lately. So I think this is a tough injury, and because it's concussion, it's hard to forecast. You ask any coach in the league, excuse me, and he'd rather have a broken bone than a concussion. Because with a broken bone, you know when they're going to be back. With a concussion, you got no idea. So I think this is difficult and one we're going to have to watch.
Ryan, the Edmonton Oilers are playing in Buffalo tonight. I heard a couple Buffalo media members refer to this again as the McEichel Cup because the Oilers are struggling so badly, and the Sabres, as we know, are near the bottom of the league and are not expected to really, challenge for anything more than 28th or 29th spot. I mean, this might be a good fortune for Dallas Eakins that they are playing Buffalo. I mean, it's a chance to, maybe get a victory and right things. But if that happens, I mean, is there an appetite in Edmonton for just saying, okay, we have the chance that we can get McDavid or Eichel this year if we have one more bad season? I mean, I can't imagine they want to finish down in the dumps once again.
No one wants that. No one wants that. But at the same time, you say, well, we've already come this far. It's like, well, it's like this car is already breaking down. It's got 3 wheels on it and the steering doesn't work. But let's just keep going because at the end of it, if we make it to the end of the line and we're in contention, look, Connor McDavid, from what I've seen, I saw a graphic the other day comparing his numbers to Crosby's. In the OHL, and it was startling how much better Connor McDavid's numbers are than Crosby at the same age. It's ridiculous, in fact. He's almost lapping the field there when you compare the two. And it's, look, the guy's a generational talent. This isn't like we're tanking for the opportunity to draft Nail Yakupov or maybe we could get Ekblad or, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. This guy's a cut above. And so that's an intriguing piece. That's an attractive carrot when you're already saying, look, we're 13 games into the season. The playoffs are already a distant possibility. So is it really worth it to make some moves to try to rehabilitate this roster and get back on track to what? To finish 12th? The Oilers are so used to losing. I don't think the fan base would be that disappointed in another lost season. It would just be the status quo at this point. That's legitimate.
Ty, I know there have been some reports over the last couple weeks. I mean, we've heard the Tyler Myers stuff in Buffalo. Chris Stewart seems to be a name that keeps popping up on a number of fronts. I don't know if Tim Murray is going to be making a deal like now. I mean, it's November 7th. Usually teams wait until later in the month before they start making deals, but apparently he was in Ottawa recently. We've heard the Bruins connected to him. We've heard the Penguins who are looking for a top six forward. From the Boston point of view, do you think Chris Stewart is an ad that would help the Bruins? I would think that if they're looking for something to add right now, it would be on the blue line.
Yeah, I don't think Chris Stewart is a fit in Boston. People have this idea that you can just plug in a big winger on Krejci's line with Lucic and that's going to work, but I don't think Stewart fits the mold for them. I think he's too streaky, he's too inconsistent, and he doesn't look as engaged as you'd like on most nights. Granted, playing with Buffalo can do a lot of things to a man, but that's one of the things I noticed when I watch him. Even with St. Louis, he seemed to fall out of favor there as well. So I look at him and I think his talent's there, but I don't think Julien would dig his style. I don't think that Claude would be a big fan of him. And like you said, the point is becoming a bigger issue for the Boston Bruins. Today, Coach Claude Julien said that Dave Warsofsky, one of their call-ups, is going to be out for quote-unquote a while. So that another blow for that blue line that's already without Torrey Krug, Kevin Miller, and Zdeno Chara. So I think that will be their focus moving forward here. This comes back to the Johnny Boychuk trade that we've kind of complained about now for 2 months, I think, or month plus now. So the Bruins are in a tight spot, and I think they are getting contributions offensively out of Matt Frazier and out of Seth Griffith, which is kind of alleviating the pressure of adding a top six winger. So I think they'd be more focused on defense right now for sure.
Kevin, not to cast aspersions on the players who are getting deals right now, but there have been so many injuries on the blue line, Boston, the Rangers, Philadelphia for a time, that guys like Koliakovo and even Thomas Caberlet, there you go, Ryan, I had to mention his name. Thomas Caberlet gets an invitation to the New York Rangers and possibly might be signed depending on how long McDonough and Klein are going to be out, and we know Moore is suspended for a few more games, and Dan Boyle I don't think is anywhere close right now to getting back. Is it the bottom of the barrel right now, and are teams that maybe are trying to trade a defenseman like the Sabres or maybe Toronto, are they in an enviable position to make a deal?
Oh, there's no question. I've spoken to GMs around the league, and they said, there's way too many teams looking for defense, and there are virtually none available, and those that are available, the cost is way too much. And we've talked about on past shows about Myers and why they believe they can ask for so much. Well, first of all, Myers is not traditionally the type of player that's available in the trade market. He has a lot of potential, a lot of upside, and would fit nicely on a contending team. But it's also just the fact that there's a shortage. It's supply and demand. It's capitalism here at its best, and that's why I don't really think you're going to see much help out there. I think probably what you're going to see are these little deals where you have a guy who's up and down on the NHL team and the AHL team getting moved for a prospect who might be a little better than he is simply because the team needs defense. So I don't see much help out there. I know a lot of teams are scrambling around looking for defensive help, but I don't see where it's coming from.
Well, the Jake Gardner talk can be quelled for at least a week or so because he took a shot off of his foot last night in Colorado, and it's reportedly a deep bone bruise. So, that usually means a week or two because he won't be able to get his foot back in the skate. But, Toronto is sort of wallowing there. They lost in a shootout last night. They're 6-5-2. I know that I don't believe they're on the verge of firing Randy Carlyle. I think they might be on the verge of making some sort of deal, but the question is what for what. I don't think Ron Francis came out yesterday and said he hasn't even talked to anybody about Eric Staal. So it doesn't sound like there's any kind of impending big deal happening, but we'll probably have to wait again until after American Thanksgiving to see any kind of deal like that being done. Okay, guys, we're pretty close to 2 o'clock here, so we'll call it a day and tell everybody to enjoy the hockey weekend. We'll be back on Monday, and Eklund hopefully will be back from his back ailment, and he will be hosting another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Ryan Garner, for Ty Anderson, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the weekend.